Okay, welcome to the Healing Sexual Trauma Summit. I am Marcy Little, and I have here with me today Annie Brook. Annie Brook, thanks for being with us.
Hi, Marcy. I'm delighted to, you know, healing sexual trauma is one of my favorite. It's so important. It's just so important. And so anything that can provide resources and help people, I'm all for it. So I'm happy to be here with you.
That's great, and that is what this is all about. And we're just delighted to have you. You are such an incredible resource. So I'm just going to say a few things about you, Annie Brook, so people can learn more about what you do. You're the founder of the Brook Institute. You're a somatic therapist and an author. And you have over 35 years working as a therapist in public schools with foster children who suffered sexual abuse, gang youth, and you also have a booming private practice working with clients and practitioners alike. Is that right?
That is, I'm in private practice now and doing education, though I have worked in the public schools and with the foster children who are sexually abused. So that all of that work in the public schools and with gang youth really shaped my understanding of some of the deeper aspects of life, real life.
I bet it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet it did. And when I read that you worked with those um, that group of people, I was very curious, actually. Curious about how you got into that, curious about um, what drew you to that.
hmm I think in my own healing journey, I realized I needed help. I had gone through some adult trauma as a young 20-year-old with a house fire and a partner who became alcoholic and the house burning down and I was just really at a complete sense of shutdown, like my brain wasn't working and my animals were killed and my whole sort of life trajectory just got. And so we built another house. I was so tenacious, we just stayed with it,
Mm-hmm.
but I realized I was uh, in not a good place in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
I think circumstances led me to get a job on a fishing boat. I had a big fall off the top of the wharf, which was actually a wake up call that put me in touch with a sense that there's more to life.
Mm-hmm.
There's more to life than my trauma
Yeah.
and living in a way that doesn't feel functional. And so I was fortunate to have a sister out in Berkeley who worked at a meditation school. And having had this really, it would be called, some people call it a near death experience. But for me, it was really as if I felt for the first time held in this love while my body was falling off this wharf, and luckily I avoided landing on rebar and just hit an old tire. But it was a, pretty threatening experience. But fortunately, my mind shifted to a place of feeling held in love, and that foundation was more important than whether I survived or not. Like I could feel, my brain literally going, well, if I survive, great. And if I do, then I made a vow that I'm going to learn what this amount of love feels like in the body, and how to access this kind of field of well-being and care. And so fortunately I did survive, and that sort of was the internal vow. And I say that because I think many people who have experienced debilitating trauma or coercion or being disempowered have to at some point make a vow to heal.
Mm-hmm.
It helps, I would say. You might come across good teachings and support, but that internal vow is the thing where you say, I'm not a victim. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's key to the resourcing of life.
Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that. I loved watching you because you touched your heart so many times. It was like, here comes the cliff. And Annie's going over, and then with your hands, this being held in love. and how
Mm,
that was the overwhelming experience in what could have been overwhelming in a totally different kind of way.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What a powerful experience you had. Life
Mm,
changing, really,
mhm.
life altering.
Yeah.
And so this is the experience that that helped you to realize, wow, I want to live this way in my body,
Yes.
and I want to help other people live this way in their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it was more honestly self, at first it was like, wow, I have a lot to learn. And I found myself going out to California, studying at this meditation school. And I happened to arrive in Berkeley at the time when somatic work was just beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And it was perfect because I enrolled immediately, in addition to this meditation and hands on healing, working with what we call energy medicine now. Uh, I also enrolled in a 4-year training in emotional release body work called Neo Reichian work and group process, which build the skillful relating and working with the emotions with other people. And that was just eye opening. And it helped me cleanse all this sort of stuffed experience of, not speaking up when my partner was drinking, or not knowing how to address conflict, or how to feel instead of just numbing out. So
Yeah.
I was very grateful. I arrived at the right place at the right time.
Yeah. And I think, we are the wounded healers, right?
Yes.
We have to offer what we've already learned to give ourselves.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's important to say because no one is on a pedestal. No practitioner, no speaker, no anybody should be elevated above so that the person knows they have tools and resources they can apply. And
Mhm.
their application with support that makes all the difference.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And
Yeah.
there was just one more piece in what you said that felt really essential, which is we have to really make the vow.
Yes.
We have to give ourselves over to the healing.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's going to be easy
Oh,
in the
it's not
beginning.
easy. It's very humbling.
Very humbling. And yet we have to just really make that commitment to ourselves.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's almost like my wish to your audience, please
Yeah.
know you're not broken forever. And please, make that vow for yourself.
Yeah. Makes me teary just to sit in this with you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's see. We were going to talk a little bit about why sexual abuse. I can't read my card because I'm not reading my glasses. There we go.
Oh, of course.
Okay, yeah. Why sexual abuse haunts people long after it is over. Could you speak a little bit to that, Annie?
Yes. And I think what I would have to say is I learned this from the children.
Mm,
I was, hired on as an after school program with the sexually abused foster children as a therapist. And I was sort of the music director. And I thought, oh, I'll just give them good things and fun things. And they started to kick at me and spit at me and kick me. And I realized, oh, I actually have to show up with limits.
mhm,
And then they started to trust me. And then we started to actually build relationship, because so much of abuse is there's no proper adult limits. Often with sexual abuse, especially if it's between a parent and a child, which was often the case with these children, or an adult and a child, they didn't have adults who set clear limits.
mhm,
And so then I was in a circle with my lovely little kids, and I had a 4-year-old. He was developmentally 4, and he was 8 years old. He had been locked in a closet for about 4 years,
mm,
and yeah, it's just tragic. And so he was sitting on my lap, and all of a sudden I was starting to feel turned on, and I was like, I do not get turned on around children. What is going on?
mm,
And I realized that this little child's body had experienced arousal states that was not age appropriate, right? Yeah. And so I just, lifted him off my lap and put him beside me. But it was a big aha moment about the energetics of sexual energy,
Mhm.
especially if it's not through two consenting adults, right? And so that led me, that understanding, I continued on to do my private practice. Plus, I had volunteered with children in the trauma centers at Oakland's Hospital and Children's Hospital. So I was curious about the impact of experience on behavior. One little boy who was 6 kept falling down,
Mm.
and they didn't have any idea why. And it turned out he had witnessed a very traumatic thing. And so I won't go into details just because we're here to talk about the healing. But in that process, when I could relate to him from direct experience of understanding death or understanding loss, he could metabolize something in his brain.
Mm.
And for healing, it's the energetics, it's the what's living in the brainstem in terms of a freeze response, what's living in the dissociative habit.
Mhm.
Because dissociation, and I teach this in my complex trauma class, what are the 4 types of dissociation and how was it the best strategy at the time? And what I find with, especially with sexual abuse, that I always look for where's the dissociation? Where does the person go? And what is going on energetically in the body? And I find that long after an experience of sexual abuse, someone could have sexual abuse in childhood and in their adult life sexualize their own behavior without knowing it.
Mhm.
So there's just a lot of gaps in awareness. And I think it's because of the dissociation.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Because when we're dissociated, we're not actually in a state in our bodies, in a relaxed state in our bodies. So we
Right.
can be aware of what's going on and what we're experiencing and how it's impacting us and how we're impacting others.
Yes, exactly.
Right, right. Okay. So then what do you do?
That's a great question. That's a great question. First, you have to put on your inner detective hat. And that means the first thing is to slow down
Mhm.
because arousal states by nature speed us up.
Mhm.
And the mental body doesn't like confusion. And I believe that sexual abuse is confusing,
Mhm.
especially for a child, if they get attention, maybe it somehow feels good. And yet it's so confusing because it's so wrong.
Right.
And so when there's confusion, that's when the brain actually wants to speed up to organize chaos.
Uh-huh.
And so the first step is to slow down and tolerate the confusion,
Mm.
let it pass like a wave.
Mm.
So the steps are really about reclaiming the sensate body at a pace. It's about 6 to 10 times slower for the body to catch up with the brain.
Mm.
And this is the things that people hate the most is when I try to get them to slow down. They don't like it. I didn't like it either.
Right,
I,
especially if that's been a resource that's allowed them to survive and function.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I would say what you do about it is you practice slowing down and understanding what are the double binds. Maybe there's excitement and fear going on. Maybe there's arousal and hyperarousal. And so you start to become like, oh, you get to know what your nervous system does.
Mhm.
So there's the physicality of that in terms of sensations. And then there's the emotionality. Oh, what, am I afraid? Am I happy? Am I, angry? Some
Mhm.
people, anyone who would even be interested in them as an adult, they get mad about it because they're still mad about sexually abuse,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Or they'll get all excited, but underneath that is so much fear
Uh-huh.
and contraction.
Yeah.
And so normal dating gets very confusing.
Yeah, I know that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
having first off enough internalized vow and resources to be willing to be vulnerable to the healing required.
Mhm.
Because usually we block out things we don't want to deal with because they were too much.
Mhm.
But I always say to people, you have a lot more cells now that can metabolize the chemicals of unprocessed emotion.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's another key factor in terms of what do you do is how can you breathe and tolerate the discomfort
Mhm.
and slow it down and reorient to present time. Use your eyes, use your ears. Sometimes I have people just keep a little, nice smelling. This is my little doTERRA. I
Mhm.
like the one, what is it called? Terra Shield, like a little protection.
Uh-huh.
That smell brings you back in the body.
Right.
And
Right.
so these are all the tools.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that. There's so much to it, isn't there? Yeah, and it's so important to have a guide who can really help somebody whose habit or pattern is to be outside of their bodies figure out, well, how the heck do I get in here?
Yeah.
Because it seems
Exactly.
kind of dangerous in here. It feels scary, dangerous, all of those things that you're mentioning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the untold story.
Mhm.
When you become the compassionate detective, the compassionate witness, the story will actually start to tell itself. But then you have to be willing to hold it, to,
Mhm.
to allow it, and to understand that it's asking you to participate in it, not to shut it down, not to make it a banner of identity, right? But to participate so that the body mind regulates again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Ah, just makes me want to take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And slow myself down even just as I listen to you and I take all of this in. Um, so it seems like a natural segue then to talk about how the experience of sexual abuse shows up in our adult relationships.
Yes. And people will have their unique experience of it. I did not experience sexual abuse. I have the experiences that my clients have and my understanding of helping them with arousal states.
Mhm.
So the first thing you want to look at is behavior. What am I doing in my adult relationship? There's attachment dynamics, which are child to parent that learn dynamics. And on top of that, if there's sexual abuse, that can be a whole nother layer.
Mhm.
So in my online course, Relationship Ready, it helps people learn about their attachment dynamics. When you add sexual abuse on top of it, you want to look at, am I vacating when my partner touches me?
Mhm.
Am I sexualizing our touch when actually I'm not even in my body? Am I going too fast to become intimate?
Mhm.
Am I going too slow?
Mhm.
It can show up in so many different ways. And is this person really safe? How do I know?
Mhm.
So am
Mhm.
I making them pass a safety test that the bar is so high, no human being could pass it? Right? Yeah, am I making them prove? And what that usually means is the inner child that's wounded is not being held by the self adult, what I call secure adult self attachment.
Mhm. And that's an internal process.
That's an internal and a practice
Mhm.
process
Mhm.
because, a parent's job with a 2-year-old is to help that 2-year-old adjust to limits. A parent's job with an infant is to teach them the world is safe and they will survive.
Mhm.
And so we have a developmental arc of learning. So it depends on what your wound, what age she or he is at the time of expression with your adult partner.
Mm.
Sometimes it could be your inner 2-year-old. Sometimes it could be your birth trauma coupled to your sexual abuse trauma.
Mhm.
Sometimes it could be just shock, meaning you're in a freeze response. And so you're actually not processing well.
Mhm.
And so this is a key to understanding is that our perception, sight, sound, smell, touch, weight and pressure are all, and the eyes are just gathering data relentlessly.
Mhm.
And if we've got a filter in place from the past, we're not gathering accurate data.
Mhm. Right.
And that's what we call projection.
Yes, exactly. It's the stuck data.
Yeah, the stuck data. And
Uh,
that's why when in clinical work helping people, I am trained in hands-on work, very, very skillful hands-on work, but I use an educative touch contract because especially with abuse history, whether it's sexual abuse or physical abuse, even emotional abuse, someone can have an experience, act like it's fine in the office, and then during the week between sessions, they will wig out. And all of a sudden, I could be in the role of the perpetrator,
yeah.
and that kind of projection happens in adult relating
Yeah.
between partners. And so, learning to reel in the projection and be willing to come back and talk about it is
Uh-huh.
key.
Right. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, I work with people who sometimes they need me to turn and not look at them directly, for example.
absolutely right.
Yeah. And how important it is for them to feel like they're in charge of what the boundaries and the limits are in our sessions.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Sounds like I don't know your work personally, but it sounds like you do really attuned work to the
Yeah.
field of shock.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've talked a bit about this. Is there anything more you want to say about what heals such past experiences?
I think another key component is the trust in a good enough life.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Right. We're
not
not looking for perfection here. What are
we're
we
not
looking for, Annie?
enough enjoyment,
Yeah.
enough pleasure, enough fun,
Mhm.
so that as you're healing internalized trauma or shock, really, often the nervous system is frozen, and that's when dissociation happens. But in that process, sometimes you have to bookend it, put it up on the bookshelf, and go dancing, right? Or watch a movie together,
Mhm.
or just have your own time in your home, and the house can still breathe. It's not hypervigilant household.
Uh-huh. And not hypervigilant healing.
No,
Uh-huh.
not over processing everything.
Uh-huh.
It will take the spark out of intimacy faster than anything.
Hmm.
We're not meant to be process machines.
Yeah. We're meant to be enjoying ourselves while we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's, I always say, when you can, this is a quote by Florida Scott Maxwell, which I just love. It was on the wall of one of my best therapist offices. I was the client and I was recovering a lot of family of origin material. I had a great family and you still have stuff to figure out. And on the wall it said, when you can claim the events of your life, all that you have been and done, which may take some time, you are fierce with reality. And I love that. All the way back to the precognitive, even back to birth.
Mhm.
You can integrate the story of your sexual abuse, and it's no longer a trigger.
Mm.
And you can even limit, you can be a good parent to the 2-year-old who wants to get triggered still. You're like, no, 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 we're on a nice dinner date and I'm fine.
You can sit over here and here's some Cheerios for you to eat and play with, and I'm going to have this nice dinner right now, and I'm drink a little bit of wine and maybe get a hot fudge sundae.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't have to be rigid.
Mhm.
Perfectionism as if to control.
Yeah, right. Which often is something that comes out of the experience of trauma.
It totally, yes. Even I see this in birth trauma too. Just the need to control the environment and therefore control the other person. And there's even an attachment style that I think develops when there's too much chaos, and abuse I think of as chaos.
Mhm.
That's called controlling caregiving, where you'll take care of the other person to manage your own anxiety.
That sounds a little bit like my husband.
Yeah, it's nice at first, but it's a little too much, right?
But we've come a long way.
That's good. And
Yeah.
then just add the other piece of control can be punitive, where you're critical and blaming of your partner. They can
Uh-huh.
never be good enough.
Uh-huh. That sounds more like me.
There you go.
But we can also laugh about that. So, this brings up another question since I brought my partner into our conversation. When we have partners, they have their own trauma.
Yes.
They have their own unmetabolized stuff. And yet, here we are doing this dance. And we've most likely chosen somebody whose trauma kind of aligns with our trauma, our unresolved suffering. And there we are, and then maybe one of us enters into a commitment to heal.
Yes.
And then what?
Wow, that's a really good, that is the place of, are we together in healing? And they don't have to do it the way you do it. But if someone doesn't address eventually their unresolved conditioning that interrupts true intimacy, it's not going to be satisfying.
Mhm.
Or you're going to have to adapt to it and know you're adapting.
Mhm.
You're not expecting them to change, or you're trying to fix them, or being covertly sneaky about it, but you're having the discussion of, wow, I'm starting to get healthy, and I can see that some of the reactivity is no longer mine.
Yeah.
That's like, here's the mirror. And that's when it's good to get outside help. That's why couples therapists exist, to help tease apart, the parts of it. But it is so worth it
Mhm.
to have a long-term relationship with someone you trust and you've worked through some depths, so that the relaxation of life can unfold.
I like how you said that.
Mhm.
Annie, this has been a delicious talk for me.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And, I felt inspired when I first started discovering you online and started watching some of your videos on your Instagram feed, which are right on the money. And there's just a treasure trove there of um, snippets of things we can do right away
Mhm.
to help regulate our nervous system, for example. So, like, let's say that I was dysregulated right now. What would be the first thing you would say to me or suggest?
I would have you put your hands like this, maybe rub them together.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would consider like you're holding a breathing ball,
Mm.
and see if you can feel your cells breathing.
Mm.
It's like, can you find sensation? So that is one. There's lots of little things, but breath is so key.
Mm.
And then I would say, look around where you are so that your head turns.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to cross the midline
Mm-hmm.
body. I don't want you in a freeze response. And then I would say, orient to beauty.
Mm.
Yeah, find something beautiful to look at. So we go right to the body.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you want to interrupt what you're telling yourself, or find out what you're telling yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
Because that's a big part of many people actually numb out in the body and then mentally go off, either
Uh-huh.
self-attack or blame or just perfectionism.
Mhm. Yeah.
So returning to the body, returning to movement. And for
Mhm.
some people, this is a key. Some people get flooded and they, if you don't know as a therapist what flooding presents as, you please ask your people, are
Mhm.
you washed away inside? Because
Mhm.
sometimes you can't see it.
Uh-huh.
They need to stand up and push against the wall.
Find a boundary.
They need to
Okay.
feel, yeah, and proprioception, the ability to feel the
Mhm.
body through the joint.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
those are some ideas.
Great. And I hope that anybody who is listening right now is trying that out as Annie guided us. I know I did, and it felt
Yeah,
great. So we're going to come to a close today, and Annie has a couple of things to offer. One is a free gift, and there's also there are 2 online series that you offer. Would you like to tell us about those?
yeah. The free gift, I'll say, is a PDF called Musings of a Body Mind Therapist. And why I chose that, you also can get my free PDFs. I have a library full of things. But why I chose that one is it has you muse about the expression of trauma.
Mm.
And the online courses are very loaded with resources. You actually join a membership site and it has videos, it has reflective writing, it has bonus practices. One is called Relationship Ready, and that's really to do the inner work of relationship. And even if you're already in a partner, and that I'm offering a 50% discount on. And then the more it's I would say advanced just because it's a longer course. It's a 12-week online course that has it's called Healing Complex Trauma, and I'm offering a 35% discount on that. So I will give you a coupon code that people can use so they can get the discount and the all the links and that sort of thing. But my passion is the more we all heal, the better the world is. And so I just, want to invite people to join me on the YouTubes or the Instagram, to join your summit, to find all the resources that are now being able to be shared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you, Annie.
Hooray.
I know I wrote this to you in an email, but when I look at the work that you have done and the dedication that you have made your life about for the last at least 35 years, I'm just humbled. You're a treasure.
Well, thank you. I have to credit my mama and my dad, but my mom was a social worker and she believed in we can all heal. She was helping people of color get mortgages when I was a kid. Like we can all do this, right? How do we bring our resources together?
Mm.
So I always thanks, Mom.
All right.
All right.
Okay. Well, Annie, best wishes to you. And thank
Yeah,
you.
you too. And to all your viewers, just wishing you the
Mm.
best.
Yeah.
The teacher within as well.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye bye.